Well, we're back again for the second episode of Unplugged for 2021. Great to catch up with Peter Searle last week on the eve of St Kilda's AFLW season beginning, and it was a terrific start with a 9-point win over the Western Bulldogs, reversing the result from round one of last year. This episode brought to you by our good friends who were on board a little bit throughout 2020 at originaluggboots.com.au. We've all got our pair, Australian-made and Australian-owned, with over 30 years' experience manufacturing sheepskin Ugg boots in Australia. And you can win your very own pair of Unplugged podcast Ugg boots. Just head to the bottom of our podcast website, which hopefully by now you've all found, unplugged.captivate.com.au, and join the mailing list. It is that simple. We will pick one male and one female to win their own custom Unplugged Ugg boots in about 3.5 weeks' time, Sunday the 28th of February. So that website again, unplugged.captivate.com.au. Thanks to originalagboots.com.au. In a moment, Chris Toce will join us to reflect on the off-season, a very different off-season from a recruiting point of view for the Saints and how they helped to put the list together, complementing the trades with a couple of nice draft picks. We have sat down with Nick Dalsano in the last week or so as well, so that will be coming up on a future episode in the next couple of weeks as we continue a series that we have done with much enjoyment over the last couple of years. But the AFLW season began last week with one of the best games we've seen in the AFLW over the course of the journey. An entertaining 9-point win, 8-3-51 to 6-6-42 ahead of the Nathan Burke coached Western Bulldogs. And of course, Burke has been a guest of ours along the way. The G-Train, Greiser with a couple of goals. Patrikios could hardly have played a better game. She was outstanding all the way through. Guttridge with a couple of goals, including the sealer in the last couple of minutes, which was really important for the team as well. But I'll welcome our panel. H, first of all, to you. It was a really pleasing start, especially to see footy back at Moorabbin with crowds, and St Kilda beating the Western Bulldogs as they did, obviously, in the men's final series last year.
Yeah, it's just great to see people around the boundary at the football. I mean, you're seeing, in Melbourne, that is. Obviously, we saw them up in Queensland last year, but yeah, back in Melbourne, football fans, it's heading the right direction. We're hoping, we heard, 75% possibility of crowds at games going forward. So, yeah, as long as we keep the streak of no cases going, we'll be fine and, yeah, get to the games. But, yeah, great win. And so you're sort of sitting there and thinking, when they got to within 3 points, you're going, yeah, last year you're sort of thinking, last year I don't think they probably would have been rolled. But you just looked at the determination they had, and that last 5 minutes, that was just pressure. And, yeah, get the one out the back, kick the goal, seal it. It was good to see, and good to get onto a winning start for the season to hopefully push further forward.
Yeah, I was there on for round one, and it was just one of those amazing atmospheres. It wasn't quite the same as round one last year for that historic night, but I think there was 2,000 people there or something like that. But it sounded like 10,000 people. It was very loud. It was very noisy. The atmosphere was amazing, and just watching those two games, the skill level and the development of our squad from last year to this year was night and day. The skill level was incredible, and there was some really good to watch passages of football from defence to forward. And look at that goal from Kate Sheila in the goal square that started with the contest in the middle and went to a Kate McCarthy contest. The jets on McCarthy to burst away from that contest and deliver on the run to Sheila in the goal square was champagne footy, as Dennis would have put it. And it was just great to watch. It was I think, in my opinion, the best game of AFLW football that we've seen over the couple of years of that competition. Definitely the best game I think that we've played as a unit. Really, really fun to watch, and just great to see that the girls representing the colours in that manner.
I thought Tony White was brilliant. Smith, very good as well. There's plenty of good stories with players coming back from injury, but I thought the defensive setup overall was pretty sound. The Bulldogs obviously had players like Huntington and the like down there that are pretty handy players, and we saw last year when they kicked 4 or 5 in the first quarter against us with marking options leading up at the ball. So I thought our defence held up pretty well. And you're right, H, it's a game that we would have lost in previous years in the AFLW. We didn't have a great record in close games last year, with the exception of the Melbourne win fairly early. So, it was really good to get that result. They certainly deserve to hang on and win it. But it was nice to get the full stop on it, because it did feel like we were going to get overrun in the last 5 or 6 minutes. But plenty of good stories out of the group, which is good to see.
It's good to see. Also, we spoke last year about the improvement in goal kicking in the men's team. At one stage, I think in the third quarter, we were six goals straight, and not all of them were dollies at the top of the goal square. There were some decent shots of goal there from 35, 40, close to the 50-meter mark. Some on angles, some on the run. There was some decent shots on goal there, and it looks like there was a big focus in that skill level and development in that skill level over the preseason, because like I said before, it was just night and day from what we showed last season.
Yeah, I think it looks like Peter's got the team very well gelled this year. The game plan sort of looked like it worked quite well. They knew what each other were doing. They were sort of like, okay, this is where we're going to go to. This is where the game's going to open up out this side, or they just kind of, you can see the plans are in their head going, yep, okay, this is what we want to do. There used to be, when you go back to like the first season, it was sort of kick, chase a little bit. But now you're seeing the structures, you're seeing the game plans, and they're actually making them work. And so it's becoming very tactical. And with Peter's mind and the experience he's had in the AFL itself a couple of years back, I think we've got a very good coach there to lead us a long way.
So, and speaking of which, H, you asked Peter last week on this show what she was going to talk to the girls about before they ran out to the ground. She said something like, I want to tell them how inspiring they are. And I don't know if anyone who watched the Inside the Game video that the club put out over the last day or two, but that was essentially her whole pre-game speech, was telling the girls that they are inspirations, not just to little girls around the country and to footy fans, but to herself and to other adults and stuff. So, well, a good question last week, H.
I'll take that.
And I think most of us now, I mean, that one of the joys of the AFLW is obviously we have 2 St Kilda teams to barrack for, and 2 St Kilda teams that are striving for success at any given point in time. And obviously the most important thing, without getting too political about it all, is that everybody gets the opportunity, if they are good enough, to represent St Kilda one day. So that's fantastic, and it was a great result. A tough game this week. North Melbourne could conceivably be the best team in it. They absolutely smoked Geelong last week, and they probably wasted last season, the Kangaroos. I reckon they won their first 4 or 5, then dropped a couple late in a really tough conference. Fremantle beat them in the last round, and they missed the finals. Now, in the end, there was no final series, but they wouldn't have taken part in it if there was. So they got a very, very good list. The game sold out, I think, in 28 minutes for Hutton Street on Sunday, which is remarkable. But that's a bit of an indication. We look like we're a pretty good side that's a chance to play finals, but we'll find out how good we are, I think, in this game against the North Melbourne side that moves the ball really, really well. So if we could roll them, then we're clearly right in it up to our ears, I would think.
Well, I think aside from the 2-time premiers in Adelaide, I think North Melbourne really are the kind of the barometer when you look at their list. It really is a star-studded list. They've got stars in women's footy on every line, and they've been built that way deliberately. They went out and recruited stars from other clubs over the last few years. That was one of their goals. And you're right. If we can take it up to them, then it puts us in a really good position to kind of play on for the rest of the season. But I'm not even sure that we need to win it. I think if we play our game and we play the sort of footy that we did last week, we play offensive minded. We're going to keep the ball. We're going to move it quickly. We're going to find the right options and play instinctual footy, which I think was the real one of the real good things to see last week. Then I think we'll give it a good shake. And as long as we can do that, then they're going to take a lot of confidence into the next couple of weeks too.
Yeah, it's probably the perfect time to play North when you look at it as well. You go, we're on the back of a great win, and you come up against a team who has just annihilated an opposition. You've got the benchmark right in front of you. Second week up, it's a nice early yardstick to see where you're at, so we can get in there and Lloyd. All you ask is best effort possible, and we'll see exactly where we're sitting.
For all of those that did love the old school football experience, I think it's St Kilda's first game at Arden Street since 1978 of any description. So for those that do enjoy that tradition, and St Kilda won that game with a kick after the siren, I think back in 1978 as well, with about 25,000 people on the ground as the ball was kicked. So, my dad always tells that story back from 1978. But yeah, hopefully some Saints fans snapped up those tickets before they sold out really quickly. So we know there are reduced capacities at games, but there's still an opportunity for some to get along. So that's the AFLW. There are plenty of AFL talking points for us to reflect on the year. But before we do that, we'll get the thoughts from the inner sanctum with Saints recruiting or state recruiting manager Chris Toce.
Bit of a dream come true, to be honest. I still can't believe it, but I'm so excited to be on board with the Saints. I'm just really eager to repay the faith that they've showed in me, and I can't wait to meet all the boys and get stuck into training.
St Kilda selected Matt Eagle.
I've done a fair bit of work with regards to my footy. It's been a big goal of mine since I was a little kid to be on an AFL list, so I'm still sort of pinching myself, receiving some of the messages I did from the boys and getting the FaceTime from Rats. I was like a little 8-year-old kid getting a Christmas present. Can't wait to hopefully run out in the Saints jumper soon, so just so excited.
Of course, we are looking back on this episode for original UGgboots.com.au, Australian-made and Australian-owned, with over 30 years' experience manufacturing sheepskin Ugg boots in Australia. And we wouldn't have thought that late January, early February would still be Ugg boots weather, but we are getting a few of those days at the moment, which has been a little frustrating. But we are delighted to welcome back. We've had, this is now our second two-time guest on Unplug It. The first of our two-time guests is Aaron Hamill. The second is Chris Toce, who joins us to have a bit of a chat about the off-season that was, and it was a very different off-season. He is the state recruiting manager for the Saints. And Chris, thanks for jumping on with us again.
No worries, Darren. Thanks for having me, mate. And great company with Sammy Hamill. He's one of the greats.
Yeah, you certainly are. Been a year like no other in many respects. How's it been observing the talent when people haven't really been playing, certainly in Victoria anyway? I imagine it's been a lot of video and a lot of reflecting on 2019 almost.
Yeah, it was a different undertaking, that's for sure. Very different to anything we've gone through in the past, obviously. But as you say, it was a lot of, trawling back through vision from 2019, really probably all the way back to 2017, looking at under 16s championship games for a lot of these boys. And the amount of vision we watched last year was frightening, really. But it was all we had. So we made the best of it. And myself and Chris Vitore, we felt like come draft day that we were as well prepared as we could be given the circumstances.
Mate, a year and a half ago, we had James Gallagher, Gags, join the club as the list manager. Have there been any major changes in the footy department or the scouting recruitment department this season, given the change in how footy clubs have had to be set up over the last year?
Yeah. Look, it's obviously been, highly documented throughout the AFL that there's been a lot of change just due to COVID and the impact that's had on clubs and the soft cap and all that sort of stuff. We're pretty lucky at the Saints that in recruiting anyway that we ran pretty lean. But in saying that, sadly, there have been a couple of job losses through our department, and we really feel for those guys. It's a really hard one. I certainly feel really fortunate and lucky to be able to continue on working at the Saints and hopefully, ending up with some success on the back of all the hard work. And I guess the thing that we certainly reflect on now that the department has changed a little bit is that, those guys that aren't with us anymore, they're as big a part of this as what we are.
Now, obviously, your position itself also would have probably changed through all this. I'm assuming a lot of it's been done by correspondence and videos and sitting down at the computer rather than being in the car and going off to watch off in the country somewhere or something like that. So what's kind of changed for yourself?
Yeah, well, I guess the main thing was probably what we're doing right now, Zoom. Usually we'd get into every single home and interview all the kids that we're considering drafting and meet the family. Whereas last year clearly with the restrictions, we weren't able to do that. So we basically just hit up Zoom almost, 2 or 3 times a week. We'd schedule maybe 3 or 4 interviews with boys from Victoria and all across the country. And it was good. It was interesting. It was a bit different. I think, we'll probably adopt a little bit of that moving forward, just as a time-saving exercise. But, still where possible, we'd probably like to get in there face-to-face and meet people in person. But, that was probably the major thing that was different. And then, as I touched on before, just the watching vision, rather than getting out there on the weekends and seeing it live was probably the major thing. But we still had some really loyal and incredibly hardworking part-time recruiters across the country that were helping us out last year and getting eyes on players in Western Australia and South Australia.
That process there, the Zoom as opposed to the home visits, did it change what you were looking for a little bit? I imagine part of the home visits is getting to know the families and all of that sort of dynamic. Did your process change when it's on the other end of a computer screen in terms of what you were asking and what you were looking for and those sorts of things? Yeah,
it's a good question. I reckon, I think with Zoom, maybe there's the possibility for the person we're interviewing to be a little bit more rehearsed. And you probably feel, not that we're certainly one of the, you hear some wacky stories about clubs asking some, pretty funky questions of kids and putting them out of their comfort zone. We don't really do that too much. But certainly when you're face-to-face with someone, it's probably a little bit more intimidating than on Zoom. So, yeah, we got some pretty polished interviews, that's for sure. That was probably the biggest thing that I noticed, was that the kids were probably a little bit more polished than usual.
We had pick number 26, I think it was, after all the trades were done, the compensation picks, and then there were academy bids throughout the draft night as well. What was the plan going into draft night? And did you have, when you've got picks that late, what does your draft board look like?
Yeah, we still go in with our draft board ranked from 1 to say 50. So, because you just never know. Like, clearly, you end up going into draft night knowing roughly what the top 20 players is going to look like, but there are surprises. So, we go in and we go in with our rankings, as I said, from 1 to 50, and just tick them off. Clearly, you look at any opportunities on the night to maybe move up. If there's a player there, if a player that we've got ranked inside the top 10 is there still around pick 18, 19, 20, that's when you probably start to pick up the phone and make some calls to see whether there's something you can do. But I think, it was pretty well documented. We probably didn't have a lot of bullets to fire on draft night with our draft hand, and probably not wanting to tamper too much with next year's draft hand. So, or this year's draft hand as it is now. So, yeah, we're a little bit limited with what we could do.
I think Collingwood called about every team in the league. Did they call you at any point?
Oh, I'm sure we spoke to them at some point. They were pretty busy, weren't they? They had a big trade period.
It was a trade every 5 minutes from now that night. It was crazy.
Well, the frustrating thing was there were about 3 or 4 picks just before our pick. So we kept thinking, okay, we're going to be picking this guy now, and then there were lots of trades done just in front of us. So it was a little bit frustrating, but in the end, we were happy with what we got.
When they talk about, trades and things like that, and you're not necessarily in on those conversations, but when it comes down to, we're looking at this player, we might trade a future second, we might trade this year's second, do they engage you in those conversations and say, well, what does your draft board look like? How keen are you on X, Y, and Z? So therefore you might think, well, we're better off trading a future second rounder than a current second rounder because we like what's there, or the other way around. Is there a lot of those calls around how that works?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, we're quite involved with all that. Gags is fantastic in terms of his, open door policy, and, as a list management group, you sort of need a number of people having some input in it, and you don't really want it resting on one person. So, Gags will definitely ask us our views on this year's draft and next year's draft as well. We're always working sort of 1 year ahead. and then we try and give him a rough guide on what a particular pick might mean in terms of a player that we could bring through the door.
So pick 26 and pick 45. Can you tell us a bit about Matt Allison and Tom Highmore? And was it a goal to go into the night looking at those kind of mid-sized key size players? Yeah,
no. When you've sort of got those picks, you've got to be a little bit open to anything, and you really just want to pick good players. As probably as boring as that sounds, but Matt was somebody that we thought could really complement what we've got. Clearly, we've got Big Max there, who everyone's really excited about. I'm sure you guys are. We think Matt really complements Max potentially as well. Matt's got a really big engine, and he's going to play. We think he's going to play his best footy probably a little bit higher up the ground. So that's whereas Max is probably, he's going to clearly get up the ground at some stages as well, but he looks pretty dangerous close to goal. So Matty will give us that little bit of flexibility there, and he's still growing as well. I think last check he was about 196. He runs like a midfielder in terms of his endurance, and he's got the potential to possibly go back and play there as well. So he's pretty untapped, Matty, but we were really happy to pick him at 26.
So in regards to Matt, obviously some people may not know that his uncle was a very good footballer for North Melbourne, Brett Allison.
Yep.
Was he someone that you maybe had a word to about him at all, or did not with the restrictions this year, didn't get a chance to do that? Or
yeah, actually, I know Brett Allison because he has worked in the talent pathway. But no, we probably didn't reach out to Brett. I mean, being his uncle, I reckon he could guarantee he was going to give him a pretty glowing report. So we tend to look for the people that might tell us something bad. No, but the thing with Matty is that there's just nothing. No one had anything bad to say about him. He's a fantastic young man, really grateful for the opportunity. And the feedback we've gotten so far from the coaches is that he just loves to work. He's got a real appetite to get better, and that's going to hold him in good stead.
Tom Highmore, we'll talk about, I guess, how you got to South Australia and that process a little bit later on, but you were able to watch him live a fair bit this year. South Australia played a bit of footy, not a lot of footy, a shortened season over there, but we have had a really good track record, as we're discussing off air, with mature age defenders out of South Australia. Yeah,
it seems to be a bit of a happy hunting ground for us. So we've gone back to the well again. But yeah, look, Tom's a guy that we've been watching since he's 17. He was part of the GWS Academy as a junior and played his footy in the NEFL for Canberra over many years. I think he finished second in their best and fairest, playing sort of senior footy as a 17-year-old. He was actually quite a highly touted player as a 17-year-old, but he got glandular fever in his 18th year, and that sort of threw him about. And his footy over a couple of years in the NEFL for Canberra has been really solid, and we've been watching him. Maybe we lacked the courage to pick him out of Canberra. It's a little in racing parlance. It's sort of you're not as sure on the form out of there. But then to Tom's credit, he decided to take himself out of his comfort zone and go to South Australia. And, it was a fantastic decision that he made because his footy stacked up to that level. And if not for a couple of injuries, I think he would have put together an absolutely stellar year. In the end, he didn't play all the games, but the footy he did play was excellent. So, no, we're really confident that he's going to be able to step in and play some footy for us where needed.
But Parko just alluded that you're able to get over to Adelaide and watch Tom play a bit. How did that come about?
Yeah, so we were obviously stuck here in Melbourne during the second lockdown, and Gags had an idea. Maybe one of us should try and get to Adelaide. I put my hand up to do it. So I basically went into quarantine in Queensland through the AFL. on the same quarantine hub that Hannah's and Gresh went on. So I was there for 2 weeks, and then I went up to Noosa for 3 nights just to sort of see the team and the staff there and say good day. And then I went to Adelaide for 3 weekends. So I got the last 2 rounds of the regular season and the first weekend of the finals. So that was a fantastic opportunity. It was hard being away from family, not so hard being away from restrictions and masks and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was fantastic, and thankfully we got a player out of it. But there was no guarantee that would happen, mind you. But yeah, it kind of makes it feel like it was worthwhile now.
How did you find the first year players last year found the hub? Obviously, you knew him quite well going into the season, having spoken to him so much before the year. How did you find they found the hub and how they basically got through it all?
Yeah, I reckon you'd get lots of different answers. Some guys love the hub because some guys are real footy heads and just love being around it, and then you've got some guys that really like to get away from it, to get away from footy when they get home, and they probably didn't enjoy it as much. But no, the first year guys got through the hub pretty well. Burnsy obviously played the 1 game over in Adelaide last year, and he's really hit the ground running this pre-season from all reports. So I'd be expecting that we'll see a bit more of him in the senior side this year. But no, those guys all handled it really well. They were very professional with how they went about it, and in saying that, I'm sure everybody hopes that we don't have to go into a 100-day hub again this year.
A second-year player, I guess, was Max King, but a debutant. Pretty pleasing first season, really, at AFL level for him. And again, an awkward one for a lifelong Saints fan to debut at Marvel in front of nobody in round 1 against North Melbourne. Would have been tough, but I would imagine it's fair to suggest that the club feels he's tracking about as well as they could have hoped.
Oh, for sure. I thought he was fantastic. The thing that I loved about Max last year was just his contest, and he probably didn't hold on to as many marks as he would have liked, and he'll catch those as he gets bigger and stronger. But he just rarely seemed to get beaten. And you look at the success of our small forwards last year. I think a fair bit of that had to do with Max, and I guess the predictability of our guys knowing that he's going to create a contest and bring the ball to ground.
Another one of our kind of second-year debutants last season was a midfielder in Jack Bytel, and I think there's a lot of Saints fans that are looking forward to seeing how Jack went in his second year of AFL footy, his third year in the system after that, missing the first year. But obviously the recruitment of guys like Crouch and even Higgins to go into the midfield, what does that mean for someone like Jack, who really, when he was given some time in the middle, really showed a fair bit? And what are we expecting out of Jack in 2021?
I think the expectation of Jack is just to continue getting better. He made some really good strides last year, and I don't know what you guys thought, but I thought the few games that he played, he certainly looked up to the level. I don't think that, Brad Crouch coming in puts any limit on Jack. I think the one thing you can see with AFL footy and really successful teams is that you just can't have enough midfielders. So, and the thing about mids these days as well is that you've got to be a little bit versatile and be able to do a fair few different things. That's probably an area for Jack to continue to improve as well. And the same with Burnsy and and all the other guys. Even Hunter Clark probably wants to play in the midfield more as well. But he's pretty good at half back too. So I think competition for spots is healthy. That's what we want. We're building a better list. So from my point of view, it's exciting, and I think from what I know of those guys, your Burnses and Bytels and these types, they're up for the challenge.
We hear a couple little whispers about other things that may happen before the season starts. Is there anything that's going to further our list before we go into the year? Is anything happening there or not yet?
Yeah, we've got a few list spots available still, and that's been by design. Obviously, Mason Woods training at the club at the moment. So, he's got the opportunity to put his best foot forward and try and earn a spot on the list. But, we really want to go into this year with some flexibility in terms of list spots. So we'll have a couple up our sleeve at least going into the year. And, that way that we might have some scope to do something in the mid-year draft. If a 19-year-old kid, suddenly jumps up and looks like we'd be happy to have him, then we've got that possibility to list somebody in the middle of the year, which would be good.
The James Frawley situation, was that, I think most of us who watched the semi-final against Richmond, you could feel the loss of Carlisle in that game, obviously, where he didn't play, and Dougal Howard didn't lower his colours much over the course of the year, but Tom Lynch probably got him on that occasion. Was there a lot of motivation around that type of scenario where you're like, we're playing a team like Richmond that's got the two big boys? If one of our key backs are unavailable, Chip's got a lot of experience. He might be a player that in that type of situation could really help us out.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. And, obviously Rats and Ruffy have had a lot to do with him as well. And they know, A, the calibre of player that he is, and B, the calibre of person that he is. So, clearly he's there to give us a chop out and to help the team. But I think, culturally as well, he's going to be really positive for the group from that point of view as well. But, now that we're, hopefully becoming a better team and started to be really competitive, I guess you don't want to get caught out in those situations. And that's why free agency and the trade's there for, I guess, is to address areas that you feel like you might need just a little bit more depth.
You mentioned that culture thing, and this going back to the underage kids again, but you recruit someone like James Frawley, who comes from that culture at Hawthorn of winning and winning a lot. How much does that come into your computations and calculations when you're looking at kids, before the draft, as to what junior teams have come through, whether they've been, winning teams or losing teams? Does that come into into the conversation?
No, it's a good question, Nick. Yeah, I think I know anyway. For personally, I'm always looking for guys that play well in big games and that perform under pressure. So sometimes guys can't help that they've been in unsuccessful teams. But if when given the opportunity to play a final or maybe a nationals game for their state, that's when you want to see them play at their best and, I guess, relish that opportunity. Some guys do and some guys don't. Like I think back to Clark and Caulfield. They were guys that played well in big games. Nick Caulfield had a really good championships and he played for the Knights. They weren't so successful, but when he played for Vic Metro, he played a different role almost every single game and always played well. And Hunter just had this will to win in every game that he played. And, I think there was a final he played where he played his worst game of the year. He would have only had maybe 10 possessions, but he had something like 18 tackles. It's like, shit, this guy's fair income. He's not having a good day, but he's going to make sure that he contributes in some way.
Do you go into this year feeling there could be a slight gap in the draft market this year coming up? You got the top age kids pretty much haven't had their bottom age year ahead behind them, so they're kind of coming in a little bit underdone. Do you feel there could be more older players brought into the draft this year as a make up for it?
I'm not too sure. I think this year's draft is going to be pretty good. We're pretty excited about it. There's going to be a lot of guys that didn't get drafted last year just due to lack of runs on the board, basically. Again, going back to Nick Caulfield. So as an example, if COVID had happened in Nick Caulfield's 18th year, he wouldn't have got drafted, probably. It was he needed that 18th year to play well to actually get drafted. He ended up a top 10 draft pick. There's going to be guys like that this year. So you've got those players, and then we think that the the under 18 group this year is actually a pretty strong group as well. So I think the draft's going to be pretty good in terms of mature age. Yeah, I think the state leagues have started to regenerate again. It sort of happens that every 2 or 3 years, there's some, maybe over a couple of years, there's some really good state league players get drafted, and then maybe for a couple of years, there's not so much fruit on the tree, so to speak, and then it regenerates again. And I think we're sort of maybe coming into that, which is good.
It's the final one from me. I've always been curious. How much of the Saints do you actually get to see over the course of the year? I imagine under normal circumstances, this year it would have been a bit different. Last year it would have been a bit different. But normally you'd be offered a local game or in South Australia or WA watching an under-18s kid. Yeah. I imagine you probably catch up on replays, but how many times a year do you reckon you watch St Kilda live?
Yeah, as you say, I watch them every week, clearly on the telly or on a replay if I couldn't get to it. But in terms of live, when I first started sort of six or 7 years ago, probably only 1 or 2 times a year. We weren't very good at it, at getting to the games. We've gotten a lot better at it. So, and I think now that we're getting a bit better, we're probably getting some better time slots, night time slots. I can sort of get to those games. So I'd say half a dozen. I try to at least get to half a dozen. And as you guys, I'm sure will be keen to do. I'd love to get to a final. That'd be nice.
That would be nice. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Mate, last one from me, a bit of a cheeky one, but there was a photo of you guys just prior to the draft on all the Saints socials pages surrounded by delivery bags.
Yeah.
What did you guys have for dinner?
What do we have for dinner? Pizza, mate. Pretty boring. Yeah, just the stock standard. Just the pizzas and a few. There was some salad there as well, but as you can probably tell, I didn't hit the salads too much.
To finish off, the formation of the new, it's Eastern State Football League, I think they're calling it.
Yeah.
Is that going to change what you do a little bit? Are you going to be watching probably maybe a little bit more of that, or? Yeah,
I'm excited about it. I think. We watch a little bit of that. I think my portfolio will still mainly be looking at the majority of the work I do will be looking at under 18s players, but clearly with your Wilkies and Highmores and these guys, we do cross over into those state league players as well. And now that our team in terms of our recruiting team at the club's changed a little bit, there'll probably be even more crossover into pro scouting and some mature age watching as well, which is good, keeps you interested and fresh, and you don't want to be watching the same guys every single week. It's nice to mix it up a little bit.
Chris, thank you very much. I think one thing that we didn't touch on that I'm sure has been unfortunate for a lot of people is due to the list restructuring, probably a few more guys got delisted than otherwise would have been under a normal set of circumstances. But we certainly hope that we get some normality back soon in every sense. But well done on all of the work you guys have done, putting the list together in recent years and helping this journey through to the finals that hopefully hangs around for a while. But appreciate you jumping on for the second time.
No, thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Chris Toce there, and a few things that we did touch on right at the end was the players out. There are a lot of players that were moved on that otherwise perhaps wouldn't have been, just to run the rule over those. Nathan Brown retired sort of mid-season due to the family situation and obviously hub life. Shane Savage was pretty stiff. I think he was the last player delisted. He's now gone to play for Port Fairy down in the Hampton League down near Warrnambool. John O'Marsh probably replaced by Sean McKernan really in that role. Logan Austin, Matt Parker a bit stiff as well. Ed Phillips certainly was stiff. Langland's probably a little stiff. Jack Mayo, who was our mid-season recruit in the first of the mid-year drafts, did an ACL, which didn't help. Jack Bell and also Ryan Abbott delisted. And as we were sort of discussing a little bit off there, Jack Bell was a little stiff, and Nick Hind ends up at the Bombers. And we obviously know the ins with Crouch, Higgins, McKernan, Frawley, and the 2 draftees, Matthew Ellison and Tom Highmore. Nick, of the delistings, which one sort of probably the most unlucky? You'd say, for my view anyway, probably Savage and Phillips.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I think Savage showed enough at the back end of last season to get maybe another year. I certainly thought that he'd get picked up by another club, and was very surprised when he wasn't. But yeah, Ed Phillips I think showed a bit too. He kind of looked like he added a few strings to his bow during the season. Looked like he enjoyed the hub life as well, being up there with the boys. But yeah, it's hard to tell because it seemed like John O'Marsh was kind of one of those coaches' favourites. So I was a bit surprised when he was let go. But obviously the recruitment of McKernan kind of negates that loss. Matt Parker, I thought, he probably had his opportunities and showed bits, but not enough for long enough to get another crack, especially with the talk of reduced lists and having to cut those numbers down. But yeah, I mean, a lot of those guys, they're really likable guys and all kind of did their part. It was hard to kind of say, well, you deserve to get cut over someone else, because they all look like they put in the effort over, if not the 12 months that they were there. In the case of Jack Bell, who, like you said, was stiff after just 1 year on the rookie list, but even 2 or 3 years looked like all those guys were hard workers and put in the hard yards over what was a pretty difficult period.
Yeah, the whole reduced list thing gave us the bit of the flashback to the Homer Simpson, your cut. It was really, really rough on a few players. When you look through some of the lists from our team and other teams, you just look at those players and go, they're players who normally would not be dropped because they fit the list, but the reduced number has just got a lot of casualties this year. Logan Austin was the one I was probably kind of most surprised about, because you look at what we were missing in that last final, missing the tall defenders. Look, Austin came in as a tall defender, and he didn't really get much of a chance. From what I heard, he was playing some not bad football, but yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise when we're lacking what we were lacking. That he got let go pretty easily.
A few of the other points that obviously came out of it, of looking at the week that was too, building up towards this particular episode, was obviously the intra-club match held last week where Shaw Jarangiri fracture a leg. Now, obviously, when reports first came through, we weren't sure if that was a 12-monther or an 8 to 10 weeker. It now looks closer to the latter, which is good. And we know Jarangiri's a tough cookie, fractured leg, had an operation on the same day, and will be running within 5 to 6 weeks. And I think that underlines what he represents. But you couldn't help but think about potential, captaincy ramifications and those sorts of things. But you would imagine that he maintains his leadership role.
I don't think so. We spoke briefly about it last week. I imagine that Jarangiri is captain again this year, and that maybe Jack Steele and maybe one or two other guys get kind of the joint vice captain's role, with one of them, whether it's a Seb Ross or even Steele to step in from round one for those first few weeks while Gears is out. But I imagine there'd be conversations, and I'm sure Gears, having spoken with him, we spoke to him last year as well, and knowing the type of guy that he is, club always comes first for Jarangiri. I imagine that he would be the first to put his hand up and say, well, maybe someone else should be captain this year, but it'll be put up to the group as it always is. I can't see anyone else taking that captain's mantle from him at this point. I think that he's probably captain, and then there's a group, there's probably a leadership group below him, and maybe a rotational captaincy or something during that period that Gears is out. What do you reckon, H?
I was saying to someone, it feels like he's, like, as you say, the group's going to elect someone. I get the feeling he may say either to the group, look, I'll be, say, a mentor to someone who you want to bring through next. He might suggest that, look, he might only have the one more year left in him as captain or whatever, but maybe they go a co-captain, him and a younger player, and just while he's out, the younger player can take that role on, but get the guidance from Gears while he's there. I mean, you suggest Steele is up there as probably the favourite to take the position. I mean, there's a few others that you sort of look and go, okay, yeah, they could possibly do. I mean, I threw up the name of Jones last year as an opportunity. He's the sort of in-under player. He seems to be always talking. He always seems to be he gives good direction, it seems. So he's not someone who'd be out of the question as a possibility.
I think someone like Dougal Howard as well might. His name
possibly,
might get thrown up a little bit, the way that he directed traffic on the ground and was able to kind of see, be one of those on-field coaches that we've seen over the years.
Yeah, we don't have a shortage. That's one thing we can look and go. We're definitely not short of nominations.
According to Instagram, I think Zach Jones has spent the last week or so on Jimmy Webster's farm in Tasmania or something by the looks of it anyway. But he's certainly one. Seb Ross has led the club in the absence of Geary. Jack Steele's obviously a logical choice long term as well. There are plenty of options, which wasn't always the case. So we did speak a little bit about Mason Wood earlier with Chris. Dylan Robertson, we did say last week that deserved a bit of attention, and certainly it does. But we know how tough he's done it, Dylan Robertson. Speaking of leaders, he was in the leadership group for a while, but had the really shocking heart situation at Kilda Park against the Cats in 2018, which you just see the look on the face of the players around him when that happened as to how scary it was. There was a fairly significant relapse in Ballarat the following year in a practice match against the Western Bulldogs after the game. Then he came back and played the pre-season again in 2020 and round one, so he got back to AFL, but has taken some time away. And I think everybody, it probably ties in a little bit to Paddy McCartan to a degree, that these matters of health and things like that are far more important than football, as much as we do live and breathe it. And he's worked very hard and been a likeable player and not finished yet by any means, because that decision is his. But I think all you can do really, Nick, is wish him all the very best and hope that whatever decision he reaches is the best one for his family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, I think for a lot of us, last year, 2020, as a year as a whole, I think kind of gave us better or more focused perspective on life and how important, we treat our own lives. And good on him for taking that step to kind of, make sure that he looks after himself and he's got a great family around him. We've heard from the club over this whole kind of 3-year period what a great guy he is. And I know he spent time in the coach's box when he's been out in the past. Wouldn't surprise me to see him go into coaching. Like you said, he's always been seen and respected as a great leader around the footy club. Wouldn't surprise me to see him go into an off-field role, whether that's coaching or administration or something else in the future. But yeah, wish him all the best, because he was a great player for us. Was pretty high on my list for, prospective best and fairest winners, prospective next captain. When Rui was still around, he was pretty high on my list to take that mantle, and just seems like a really great bloke. So yeah, wish him all the best.
He grew up a Frankston boy, so I reckon he probably want to stay around the area. I think he's sort of the Frankston area through and through. Believe he's still down here, so I think he's wanting to stay around this area.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing, H? Depends who you ask, I guess.
I'm not from Frankston, so but yeah, he grew up in the area, so I believe he's in a whole family still down all this way and everything. So if there's a role at the club, he'd definitely be someone that they'd like to hold on to, I believe.
Speaking of Frankston boys, we're doing a topic on SEN this week around players that aren't in the Hall of Fame that probably should be, and we've had two of them as guests on our show, and one that we'd obviously like to have. Stuart Lowe and Nathan Burke aren't in the Hall of Fame, and neither is Nicky Winmar, which is interesting. Obviously, if you look at the big group from that particular era, and a couple of them from down that Frankston part of the world, but that's sort of digressing a little bit. In terms of the topic, so we've spoken a bit about Geary and a few others as well, and Dylan Robertson. Hardest fixture in the AFL, I think, we've probably had a lot of private conversations around that matter. It's not just the obvious where you play Port twice and West Coast twice and Geelong twice and Richmond twice, but you've got Brisbane once and it's at the Gabba. You've got the Giants once and it's in Sydney. You've got Geelong at Kilda Park as well, so not just a second meeting at the MCG or Marvel, it's actually at Kilda Park. So that's a little bit frustrating, but we do know that, Port Adelaide's never going to get the hardest draw because they have to play Adelaide twice, because that's the way the fixture works, and West Coast have to play Fremantle twice, and Richmond have to play Carlton in round one, which means they'll probably get them again. And I guess little old St Kilda, we don't have these marquee type things, so we end up drawing the shortest straw all the time when it comes around. But got to see it as an opportunity. I mean, you look at that first three games, Giants, Demons, Bombers. We've got to find a way to try to win at least two and hopefully all three of those games to set ourselves up And then if you could knock off, I think we play West Coast and Richmond in consecutive games. So if you can aim to split those 50-50 both at Docklands, then we can set ourselves up fairly early, hopefully.
Yeah, so we say when you say we got the single games harder draw, as you're saying, going at the Brisbane once, Adelaide once. That's where we got to look at the draw.
Adelaide's Darwin, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, like Port Adelaide, going there once, and
but I mean, even Adelaide, like it's not really a home game. Like,
yeah.
Everybody should beat them, but it's not even at Marvel.
So. But that's where we got to. I think we've got. I can't remember how many games it ends up being at Marvel. That's where we got to look and go. Okay, well, we've got the opportunity. We've got that many games at Marvel. We've got to make the most of those ones.
I think it's 13, so we could go 9-4 at Marvel or something like that.
And take a few elsewhere, and basically try to make. I mean, as much as we're going to these other teams' home ground, could take advantage of the home games we do have and the away home games as well.
Correct.
Well, I mean, it was always going to happen, right? We had a pretty decent schedule last season, the way that it turned out, and we were always going to get a harder one this season, especially having played finals and shown a bit last season. So that was always going to happen. It was always going to be harder than last year. It's just the way that it works. And, I think that the club's been pretty public in saying that if we want to be one of the best teams in the competition, we're going to have to win these games of footy to prove it. I think we also have to realise that one good season of footy does not mean that we're in our prime yet. And we're still, I still think we're probably another 2 years away from our prime kind of top 4 premiership contending window if things continue the way that we kind of started last season. So, if we can keep developing and keep showing that we're playing good footy, we're competitive every week, that's the main thing again, from my perspective. I think we're going to be ready for contending the year after, in which case, hopefully after having the hardest schedule in the AFL next season, that we should get a bit softer the following year. So I think that's all things that we've got to take into account when we look at these sort of things. But, it's a bit of those swings and roundabouts, and who knows, which of those clubs that were top 4 or top 8 last year, some of them are going to, it's natural that one or two of them are going to drop out and potentially not be as strong as they were last year. So you never know. It's all numbers at this stage, but you got to play it each week on its merits.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of a fallacy when you look at it too. The whole fact that yes, we're given the hardest draw apparently, but we only play 5 teams that finished above us last year. The team in 18th plays 17 teams above them. So it's one other way to look at it, going, well, there's only 5 teams better than us we have to come up against.
Yeah, and it's hard to ever classify. So Richmond's draw is the hardest because they play everyone that's below them. So the draw is never going to be judged that way. But yeah, I mean, there's 22 games. We've got to win probably 13 of them and use that as a starting point and work through it. Couple of other things as well. We'll jump into some listener questions. The champion data rankings are always interesting. I mean, they kind of lose a bit of credibility sometimes in that, for example, at Port Adelaide, Stephen Motlock's rated as elite, but Travis Boak is not. And Travis Boak's 5 times better than Stephen Motlock, because a lot of it's based on statistics, based on position. But was Jack Steele and
Dan Butler.
Dan Butler, which fair enough. But, you could argue, I would argue that Ryder and Marshall are in that sort of zone. But, that was interesting that we did have the 2 during the week. Listener questions. We touched on quite a few last week, and a lot of them have been sort of readdressed a bit today. Daniel Burns asking about Mason Wood and the Paddy McCartan conversation. Spoken about Seb Ross a little bit, and Shay Williams around leadership. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram if you want to send some of those through. But one from Coach Noodles that we didn't get to last week. Which player do you think can make the biggest leap this year, H? Is there one that you think can take a big step forward, or even a guy that underachieved that might be able to bounce up again?
Well, coming back, I think Gresham can take another step again. He's got a bit more support out there this year, so he can move into the midfield, and Higgins goes down forward. He moves down forward, and Hunter Clark moves into the midfield, and he's got the support down and then crumbing the forward line with Higgins or whoever's there. So I think he can confuse a lot of opponents. He can play one position and then all of a sudden he's playing another position, and just he'll be able to, I guess, break out in different points against different teams, and you just use, I guess, the ability to play multiple positions. So I think he can I mean, we saw what he could do before he got injured, and the difference it made to the team when he wasn't there. So I think he can carry us again a bit more. And but as we're stepping up, I would like to see Marshall take the lead, become number one ruck. Just see the transition from Ryder to Marshall, and by the end of the year, he's the number one. I mean, Ryder carried us a bit last year in that position, so if he can, get that change up, I think that takes us a long way.
Gresham's a really interesting one. I agree with you. I don't think we've even really scraped the surface of how good this bloke can be. He's shown us glimpses and little bits and pieces, and I think we've all been wowed at some of those things, and his pace coming out of tackles, the way he has an ability to get around the ball in the clinches and kind of get out of that too in those tough spots. And you're right, actually, coming into this season, he's going to have a lot more midfield support in terms of big bodies and some of those broad shoulders to kind of sit off the back of it and get around the back of packs. But I think he'll always be kind of a tough nut, hard at it. So I don't think he'll lose that part of the game, even with guys like Zach Jones and Crouch and Steele and those guys around the ball. I think we'll still see more of that, but I think we'll be able to see him be more of that versatile, midfield, half forward, wingman that we've heard is going to be really important at our club moving forward. And Chris alluded to it earlier in terms of the versatility, is what we're looking for out of our midfielders. And it's interesting, we talk about the Champion Data elite player list. Stats Insider has Jade Gresham as the second highest ranked Saint in the AFL at number 41. Stats Insider saying we've got 5 top 100 players in the competition from 2 the previous year, which is just another indication of kind of how our list has developed. And Bradley Hill isn't in the top 100 players in the AFL according to Stats Insider, and he's a big one. I think that talk about big improvers. I think we're going to see a big improvement from Brad Hill. We go back to longer quarters, back to the covered stadium at Marvel, and I think we're going to see some really solid Brad Hill football this season, and I'm excited to see that.
Spot on. And I think in order to improve, you need guys to come from outside of your best 22 into your best 22 through natural growth in the list. We saw that from the likes of Patton and Caulfield last year. I'm hoping that Jack Vitale can be that player this year that takes that step in. And a guy that certainly wasn't bad. He had an okay year, but I think he can find another level again with longer quarters and the Marvel-like situation. And that's Tim Membry, I think, can have a bigger year than he produced. He played some good footy and certainly finished the year all right, but I think there's more within Tim Membry that he can be a 45-goal a year type player when he's at his very best, complementing Max King in that lineup. So that'll probably bring us to an end for this week. As we've said, Nicky Dell, not all that far away. We've already recorded that one, so that'll be in the can in coming weeks. Big thank you to Chris for joining us earlier on in the piece. Good luck to the girls at Arden Street on Sunday against the Kangaroos. And a reminder also that you can win your very own pair of Unplugged podcast Ugg boots. Just head to the bottom of our podcast website at unplugged.captivate.com.au. Join the mailing list, and we'll pick one male and one female to win their own custom Unplugged Ugg boots on Sunday, the 28th of February. So check all the socials for that, unplugged.captivate.com.au. Thanks to originalauggboots.com.au, Australian made and Australian owned, with over 30 years experience manufacturing sheepskin Ugg boots in Australia. We'll catch you again soon.
We'll put it to a dangerous spot, coming across Guttridge. It'll sit and bounce, and this will seal the game for the Saints. And they'll win the opener in 2021. To too good.
It's been a tough 24 hours here at Moorabbin. Nat Exxon did her knee at training on Wednesday night. Jaron Geary fractured his tibula earlier today. Spirits have been down, but not for long, because the Saints marching in, celebrating their first win of 2021.